I'm going to take a picture of it so I know you're
standing.
STA. You're standing.
Sure. Would you like one?
I just want to say hello and welcome to everybody. It's just about 5:30, and welcome to our new monthly series. And we're at the end of the January, so we have a very special treat tonight. We have Gut Health, our second brain, with Ashley Meek, one of our nurse practitioners here at Vessel Health. And I'm going to give her the floor because there's a lot to cover. And thank you and welcome. And please let us know through chat or email if there's anything you need during this session, okay?
Is everyone okay if I take my mask off since I'm separated?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can like point to one of us if someone comes in. Watch that.
I will do it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can- Yeah.
Either way, I will
Okay,
too.
someone
Yeah,
comes
to
into
admit
the-
someone.
We'll try to keep an eye on
Yeah, if it shows someone coming
So
in.
even if you get on your phone. Now we'll watch, just let me know.
I'll watch the screen here, so. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, welcome. I'm excited. This is a good turnout. I didn't know how many people were coming. I knew Jay, my husband, was going to be here. So I'm like, well, maybe it'll just be Jay and Sally and that'll still be fine. So, so today we're going to talk about gut health, also known as our second brain. So you may have heard it be called that before. So let's get started. I have some disclosures. So first, I just wanted to let people know, yes, I am a nurse practitioner. However, I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian. All of the research that I did in to make this PowerPoint was, are you able to see? You're okay. Okay. Was done on my own. It was done by reading and researching. And if you have any questions, I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. Okay. So I wanted to first put in some definitions. Just to review, and as I go throughout the PowerPoint, if you see one of these words and think, what does that mean? So the first definition that I want to discuss is the term probiotic. Okay, so this is something that we're all probably familiar with. It's a little, I don't know if Zoom can see it that well. It's a little like bright.
You're going to be reading it.
I'm going to be reading it, but yeah, maybe just a little closer. Just want to make sure. Okay, so
It's better if you probably run that.
Okay, so I'll continue. We'll try to make it a little bit easier for our Zoom people to be able to see. So probiotics are good live bacteria that are that help keep our gut healthy and functioning. Prebiotics are what feeds our gut. Okay, so they're responsible for the growth or activity of the beneficial microorganism, and these are things such as our bacteria and our fungi. And then the postbiotics are the byproducts of the fermentation process, and these are carried out by the probiotics in the intestines. Then we have microbiota, which are the microorganisms. And these are found in multicellular organisms, including plants. And then something else we may discuss is the dysbiosis, which is essentially just disruption of our homeostasis. Okay, this can be caused by different things, and we'll talk about that. So, what can our microbiota do? So there are trillions, not billions, but trillions of bacteria in our guts, and they line our epithelial wall or lining of the gut to maintain our integrity of our guts. They also help to maintain an acidic environment. They break down foods that our bodies wouldn't otherwise be able to digest, so think fiber. Through this process, they actually, and I know Denise talked about this a little bit, create short chain fatty acids, which help to reduce inflammation and give us energy. And then bacteria is also synthesize essential B vitamins and vitamin K, which help defend against certain pathogenic strains. So in particular, E. coli, and also help other intruders from getting into our urogenital tract and balance our pH, and also help with excessive yeast in our vaginal biome.
And we can upload these and get them emailed, printed
Yes,
and emailed.
yes.
So
Yeah.
most importantly is what you are saying, not that so clear. So
Is it a little bit more clear on with you holding it?
No.
Are you able to see the words?
You can't see you really can't make that out. You're seeing the graphics more and you're seeing you and
Okay.
and then, can you guys hear everything okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, this brain and gut axis. So this kind of led me to the second brain, and we'll talk a little bit more about why it's called the second brain, but this is the main reason why. So we actually have this brain gut axis, which is essentially a network of neurons, and it allows the bacteria, believe it or not, the bacteria in our gut to send signals to our brain for different reasons. It could be stress, it could be telling us that we're hungry, it could be telling us that there's a pathogen. We do not have any bacteria, as you know, in our brains already. So the fact that the bacteria in our gut is able to relay signals to our brain is very, very interesting and being researched more and more. So that's what's called the gut brain or the brain gut axis, and that's another reason again why sometimes we call our gut our second brain. So this gut feeling, and I'm sure you've heard this before, like I had a gut feeling, or I had some gut instincts that told me, and so that's kind of what we're talking about here. So if this becomes altered in any way, some of the symptoms that we may feel, and I think all of us can maybe relate to some of these, are things like depression, anxiety, insomnia, brain fog, memory issues, confusion. And this is all due to an imbalance of the microbiome or the microbiota that leads to inflammation and leaky gut. In the next slide, I'll talk about leaky gut a little bit. I found this verse or this quote actually in the book that Denise referred to me. So if microbiomes are controlling the brain, then biomes are controlling everything. So I thought that was really interesting. So leaky gut, some of you may have heard of this. This is a commonly used term. It again is becoming, it's something that's more and more prominent in functional medicine, something that we try to distinguish when patients come in for different symptoms. We try to kind of feed or rule this out, I should say. So what happens is we have this, I should have the pointer, we have a lining of our gut, okay? And so if you can see here, this is the tight junction or something that we want that barrier, but sometimes we can have gaps in epithelial cellular linings, which allow things like undigested food particles, bacteria, gluten, toxins to enter then in the bloodstream. And then this can lead to things like food intolerance, because I clearly can't say the other word. Systemic inflammation, malabsorption. So that's why leaky gut is something that we really pay attention to and something that we want to try to prevent. And so here are some of the causes. So again, there's this word dysbiosis. So things that we often think of that may disrupt that balance. Western diet is a huge factor. Age, so as we age, our guts and our microbiota tend to become less and less sufficient. Environment, certain medications, so think antibiotics, alcohol, and then smoking. Okay. So there are certain ways in things that we think of to help improve our microbiome biome or microbiota. So number one is eating a diverse range of food. So think whole foods, think plants, incorporating a lot of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, fermented foods. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Prebiotic and probiotic rich foods, and I have lists of each of these as well. And then again, less eat meat and more plants. And the reason that I have diverse range of foods up there is because different foods carry different properties and they carry different benefits to the gut. So for example, you don't want to eat the same things all the time. Even if you eat a whole plant-based diet, you want to try to incorporate some diversity into your diet and not just eating the same things all the time, just to give your gut a little bit more different diversity as well. So when we heal the gut, these are things that we can expect: better mood, hormone balance, less depression and anxiety, reduce inflammation. I mean, the list goes on, as you can see here. Better energy, lower risk of disease, improved cognitive function. And the reason I have that it's never too late on there is because it's not. To regulate our guts and to incorporate more beneficial bacteria and to see a difference takes, and I mean, there's a lot of different answers, but really if you kind of give a range, it can take up to a couple days to even a couple weeks. So it really does not take a long time to see a change. It's never too late to try to adjust diet or whatever it may be, other factors, to see a difference. So we're going to kind of move into the probiotic side and talk about this a little bit. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is how to choose a probiotic. As you know, in the supplement world, there are so many different options out there. It can be a little overwhelming. You know, people ask, do I do the live probiotics in the refrigerator section? Do I do the over the counter? What's the difference? What should I go towards, or which probiotic is best for me? And that's kind of a loaded answer, because not one probiotic is good for all, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But a couple different points that I wanted to say in general. So shelf, the probiotic itself being shelf stable. So you really want to look for a probiotic that it does not have to be refrigerated. It can be on the shelf. Ideally, you want a probiotic that has a shelf life of 2 years. Okay. High CFU count. So CFU stands for colony forming units. Basically, that just stands or means the like how much of concentration of a microorganism is in the test sample. Another abbreviation you may also see is called AFU, which I don't have it on this slide. It's not as common as a CFU count. And that's an active fluorescent unit. It's basically just a little bit more of an accurate snapshot of the type of microorganisms that are in the product. So when you're choosing a probiotic, try to choose a probiotic that has ideally at least 1 billion per serving. And I know that sounds like a lot, but ideally at least 1 billion per serving of the CFU count. So survivability, so look for formulas that are delayed release capsules. The reason for this is because if you take a capsule that is not delayed release, the chances of it being broken down by your stomach acid is extremely prevalent. And so with a delayed release capsule, something that's a little bit harder, it's actually going to be able to survive that stomach acid, get into the small intestines, and then be able to make it to the colon, and that's where you want it to go. Okay. Prebiotic. So as we mentioned with the definitions, prebiotics is something that supports a probiotic, it feeds a probiotic. This is not really necessary. However, you can find options over the counter which have a prebiotic probiotic formula, a mixture of both. And so that's just an option to support the growth of the probiotics once they get into your system. And then strain diversity. So ideally selecting a probiotic supplement that has 10 or more probiotic strains. These are a couple examples. I will tell you there are so many strains, and I list a few in my presentation and kind of talk about the benefits of those strains. It's really hard to know what strain is best. Again, it's based on what you're really looking for and what you're trying to get out of your probiotic supplement. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but either way, strain diversity is the best option. So then we're going to kind of dive in a little bit to getting to know some of those strains. So getting to know your psychobiotics, and psychobiotics is a term that's used as a way to say that your prebiotic can change your mental, like we talked about, like decreasing anxiety and depression. It's eating something good. It's taking a good probiotic that's going to alternatively change your mental, your anxiety and depression, and so on and so forth. So this is an example of one of the strains, the Fidobacterium Longum or impetus. So you can see here, this strain in particular can reduce inflammation, it can prevent diarrhea, it can help mitigate lactose intolerance and food allergies, it can help reduce anxiety and reduce depression. Bifidobacterium animalis can prevent people or can benefit people with ulcerative colitis. So if that's something that you deal with, this may be a good strain for you. Can improve constipation and diarrhea in patients with irritable bowel syndrome. Lactobacillus Acidophilus. This is actually the most popular bacteria in probiotic formulas. This can help prevent diarrhea. It's useful in treating small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, which is something that's actually kind of like a newer diagnosis that's being used more often. It can actually increase your opioid and cannabinoid receptors, acting as an analgesic and mitigating gut pain. So if that's relative to you, that may be a good strain. Lactobacillus rhamnosus. I'm not an expert at pronouncing these either, so that's a little challenging. Useful in treating diarrhea, dermatitis, and actually can help with weight loss, can help reduce depression and anxiety. Again, kind of where we get that psychobiotic name from. Can be shown to alleviate OCD in mice when they actually treated mice with this. So that's kind of interesting, and can reduce levels of stress. So I wanted to go into a little bit talking about what we have available at Vessel Health. I have some samples out, and you know, I'm sure people are probably wondering too, you know, if you get your supplements here, what kind of strains, what type of probiotics we have. I put in this slide, it's pretty hard to see there, and I have a printout that I'll pass around. It's from Zymogen, which is our supplement company, and that's where we get all of our supplements from. But they gave me this really cool, like, clinical insight form on what our probiotics do, how they support our gut health, how they support cytokine balance, hormonal balance, immune support, what they've been tested against. So an example would be certain pathogens and antibiotics. So I'm going to pass this around for you to look at. And I have written down here, you know, some of their formula names are different than ours because ours are private labeled. So I have what's matching. So for example, Psychobiotic Plus, and Psychobiotic Max are listed on here, so you can kind of correlate between the CFUs and so on and so forth. So I can give that to Mark if you want to pass it around, just take a look.
And I can make some copies of those.
Yeah, we can. And so, you know, when we started the Healthy Living series, we really wanted to do a new year, new you, and talk about like restarting our systems, talk about gut health in particular. And so we decided to do make our monthly special 25% is it 25% or 20%? It is, right? Of our probiotics. And so we have that option still going on through the end of this month. So if any of you are interested, if you have any other questions regarding our specific probiotic blends, and if that's right for you, then you can just always give us a call and ask. Okay. So I want to do some true or false. So this takes some participation from the audience. So true or false? We have billions, I think I already answered this, but we have billions of good microbiome in our guts. True.
Trillions.
True.
Yeah.
Yes, billions. Mark, you're paying attention. Okay. Number 2, our microbiome weighs 3 to 5 pounds. So our complete microbiome, think about all the bacteria in our guts, weighs 3 to 5 pounds.
Maybe some people, not mine.
I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, I don't remember
I know,
that.
this wasn't in there. There's,
I want to
Are we
say true.
guessing?
Is it true?
it's true.
Wow.
So think of that. Think of how much
Yeah.
bacteria is in our guts.
Wow.
Well, I've seen that
I
fat
think it's like
example.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, 5 pounds, right?
Mhm,
Isn't that crazy? It weighs a lot. It's extremely important. Number 3, only people with health problems need to take probiotics.
False.
Number 4, you need to take probiotics only if you're taking antibiotics.
False.
Okay. Yeah. And then probiotics should be refrigerated to maintain bacterial efficacy.
False.
And antibiotics, I know I talked about this a little bit. You know, antibiotics, they're great when they're needed, but they're terrible for our guts. They really can kill the good bacteria along with the bad bacteria. So it's really important to supplement with a probiotic, not only all the time, but especially when you're taking an antibiotic. And again, that kind of goes along with the sheet I was passing around. It's interesting that some companies will test their probiotics against antibiotics and in checking the resistance of those or the sensitivity to those. So that's pretty interesting. And then another interesting fact, I don't have this on here, but about 70% of our immune system is housed by the gut. So if you think about that, 70% of our
That's
immune
huge.
system
Wow.
is housed by the gut. So it's really, really important that we take care of our gut health. So I have a short video. Let's see if it plays. It's about 4 to 5 minutes, but it kind of goes into a little bit of our gut dysbiosis, and then the topic or the title is starving our microbial self. So I want to just watch this. It may be a little bit hard on Zoom or Facebook, but hopefully you're able to hear it.
And if you can send a link, we'll attach the link.
Yeah, absolutely.
For many years, it was believed that the main function of the large intestine was to just absorb water and dispose of waste. But nowadays, it's clear that the complex microbial ecosystem in our intestines should be considered as a separate organ within the body. That organ runs on a MAC, microbiota accessible carbohydrates. In other words, primarily fiber. One reason we can get an increase of nearly 2 grams of stool for every 1 gram of fiber is that the fiber fermentation process in our colon promotes bacterial growth. The bulk of our stool by weight is pure bacteria, trillions and trillions of bacteria. And that was on a wimpy, fiber deficient British doctor.
Like
People who take fiber supplements know that a few spoonfuls of fiber can lead to a massive bowel movement, because fiber is what our good gut bacteria thrive on. When we eat a whole plant food like fruit, we're telling our gut flora to be fruitful and multiply. And from fiber, our gut flora produce short chain fatty acids, which are an important energy source for the cells lining our colon. So we feed our flora with fiber, and then they turn around and feed us right back. These short chain fatty acids also function to suppress inflammation and cancer. That's why eating fiber may be so good for us. But when we don't eat enough whole plant foods, we are in effect starving our microbial self. On traditional plant-based diets, like Dr. Burkett described, lots of fiber, lots of short chain fatty acids, lots of protection from Western diseases like colon cancer. Whereas on like a standard American diet, where we're eating highly processed food, there's nothing left over for our gut flora. It's all absorbed in the small intestine before it ever makes it down to the colon. Not only may this mean loss of beneficial microbial metabolites, but also a loss in the beneficial microbes themselves. The biggest issue presented by a Western diet is that not leaving anything for our bacteria to eat results in dysbiosis, in imbalance, where bad bacteria can take over and increase our susceptibility to inflammatory diseases, or colon cancer, or maybe even metabolic syndrome, or type 2 diabetes, or cardiovascular disease. It's like when astronauts return from space flights having lost most of their good bacteria because they have no access to real food. Well, too many of us are leading an astronaut-type lifestyle, not eating fresh fruits and vegetables. For example, the astronauts lost nearly 100% of their Lactobacillus plantarum, which is one of the good guys. But most Americans don't have any to begin with, though those that eat more plant-based are certainly doing better. Use it or lose it. If you feed people resistant starch, type of fiber found in beans, within days the bacteria that eat resistant starch shoot up and then die back off when you stop eating. Even just a half can of chickpeas every day may modulate the intestinal microbial composition to promote intestinal health by increasing potentially good bacteria and decreasing pathogenic and putrefactive bacteria. Unfortunately, most Americans don't eat beans every day, or whole grains, or nut fruits and vegetables. So the gut flora, the gut microbiota of a seemingly healthy person may not be the equivalent to a healthy gut flora. It's possible that the Western microbiota is actually dysbiotic in the first place, just because we're eating such fiber deficient diets compared to populations that may eat 5 times more fiber and end up with like 50 times less colon cancer.
That's huge.
So it's pretty interesting, and I think one of the main takeaways there, he said it probably multiple times, is fiber. Fiber is really, really important, like he mentioned, to not only to get in our diets, but to feed our microbiota or microbiome. And we just don't get enough of it. We don't get enough of it in our diets, like he mentioned. So it's really important, and it kind of can talk about, again, things that can lead to, or things that a dysbiosis can lead to, like colon cancer and like inflammation and so on and so forth, like we've been talking about. So we're almost done. Oops, I'll do that again. We're almost done here, but I wanted to kind of include a grocery list of some options. So again, probiotics in some different things that you can find at the grocery store, things like your kimchi, your fermented yogurt, your sauerkraut, apple cider vinegar, miso, tempeh, and sourdough. And then there's some prebiotic foods as well. And if you remember, again, that's what feeds your probiotics. So those are things like your beans, garlic, asparagus, onions, wheat, chickpeas, like he mentioned, oats, apples, and artichoke. So there's just a few on here. There are more options as well that I just didn't include, but just to kind of give you an idea, if you're at the store and you want to start to incorporate more of these into your diet, you have some reference. So I wanted to kind of turn it over to you, the audience, a little bit, and to share with everyone a time that you felt like either you had maybe possible leaky gut syndrome or some kind of dysbiosis. What did you feel? What were your symptoms? And how did it correlate to your brain? Were you feeling more anxious or depressed or low energy? Does anyone have a good story that they can share with?
Get back into
I don't know if we want to unmute them.
Okay.
Yeah. That's, we can unmute
Yeah.
them. So we've unmuted our Zoom participants if anybody wants to speak up.
I can tell a story about my trip to Mongolia. This is Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl.
I went about 5 years ago now, almost 6. I went to Mongolia with a small group for exploratory horse photography. And we were invited to drink fermented mare's milk made in horse skin in the dirtiest conditions I think I have ever seen. 3.5 years later, I came to Vessel Health and started to heal my whole intestine was in disruption for that long. And it did not, they couldn't test it, or they didn't test it well. So I got no help from the hospital health service I belonged to. Anyway, by eating a lot more probiotics and so it eventually resolved itself in changing my diet. But the lesson is, if you go to Mongolia, say thank you, but no thank you to the fermented mare's milk.
Oh gosh. And horse skin.
I'm gonna, because we're talking on Zoom, we're
Did you-
gonna say goodbye to Facebook for now. So thank you. I know Jen was there and a couple other people, so thank you for joining us on Facebook. We're here at Vessel Health. If you guys need us, reach out, leave your email, or reach out to us in Messenger, and we'll get back in touch with you. So Facebook friends, thank you. We'll continue here with us.
Thank you. Did you want to comment?
Well, yeah, my question was so in the past, for those 3 years, what were some of the symptoms? Can you talk about that if you feel comfortable?
Violent, unexpected diarrhea, gas, queasiness, dizzy, anxious. And I've been a really healthy person all my life, so it was not comfortable.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Well, thanks for sharing,
Yes.
Cheryl.
I guess the object is don't be too polite.
It's been 3 years. How,
This is Viola. She had a question for you,
I had a
Cheryl.
question for you. Is it, how long did it take to kind of, when you started noticing results?
Less than a month, I'd say. of
Oh,
Being
good.
really careful. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And you mentioned some of the bloating and gas and whatever else, queasiness, I think you mentioned. And those are some of the symptoms of the leaky gut that I was talking about earlier. I know I didn't really mention some of the symptoms, but food intolerance and inflammation, but those are like excess gas and bloating are some of those symptoms of leaky gut as well. So it sounds like that was a little bit what was going on with you.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Can I ask a question, or maybe we can have a little discussion about Candida? And
Yeah,
so when we look at that yeast overgrowth, I see it as dysbiosis and not having enough of that strong probiotic symbiotic interaction in the gut. But it is so hard when you have that to get back on track, because you want to listen to your body, but the yeast is talking and it's saying it wants that sugar.
Exactly.
And I know that, so I had signs such as stress and anxiety. I had skin eruptions, but so much disconnection from my body and recognizing what I needed. And so, what are some strategies that you can maybe offer to help people get on that right path to let go of that sugar addiction?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
and that's hard. I mean, I think, and that's part of the Western diet, right? Is
it's in
like,
everything. It's
Yes.
hidden everywhere.
right, it's addicting, refined sugar. I mean, not only that, but it also leads to increased inflammation. So it's hard to kind of, it's hard to weed that out, I think, because it is in everything, and to kind of make a disconnect with ourselves that are telling us that we need it. That's, I think, it's an addiction. Right? That's why most of the food has sugar in it, right? The food industry is like wants to keep us coming back for more.
Yeah.
So it's hard, you know. I don't have any specific recommendations on how to try to disconnect. I just, what I typically say and what I typically tell my patients, and this isn't just for gut health, but just in you know, when I'm talking to my patients with prediabetes or diabetes and cholesterol issues, it's more of being
Is
conscious of what you're eating and what
this where you
in the
bring your own?
and being aware is kind of I think one of the tools in the key I don't know, takeaway, because once you realize how much sugar you're actually eating that isn't, it's like hidden sugars, it's kind of a wake up call itself, and then it's like, oh wow, okay, I need to maybe change, I need to decrease, or I need to limit.
You need to share an opportunity.
Besides the, you know, our microbiome of everything that's there, how does, because we also all have parasites, right, in our gut, right, don't we also?
No,
No?
we shouldn't. We
But
really shouldn't.
But
Yeah.
I thought I read once that there's a certain percentage that everyone, or maybe that was wrong, I don't know, that's what I'm
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah, no, we shouldn't have parasites. I mean, when we think of bacteria in themselves, they can kind of act like that and kind of eat away at certain things.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what would be more helpful to kind of keep in mind, is that you want the good bacteria. You don't want the bad. You want to kind of balance that out. You don't want an overgrowth of the bad bacteria that can cause things. But the parasites, I mean, we don't typically have that, but yeah, we shouldn't. But that's another point too, is maybe, I mean, parasites can actually live in us for a really, really long time, and they can be subtle enough that we may not ever know about that until we specifically look for that. And then realize that, wow, that's what's been going on. And it can cause things like weight loss and nausea, diarrhea, I mean, so on and so forth. But yeah, so that's something to be cognizant of and mindful of. And speaking of testing, so, and I'll kind of throw this out there. I didn't plan to talk about it, but we do have a specific lab that we use. It's called Vibrant Labs. We recently started a contract with them, but they do this gut testing. It's very, very inclusive, and it's something that would be interesting in people who do have symptoms that may not really realize if it's coming from the gut or something else. But it looks at actually measuring all of the bacteria in our gut and the different types of bacteria, the good and the bad. So then you can kind of take away from that, well, do I have too much of one thing? Do I have too much of the bad and I need to add in some more of the good? And it measures it down to the specific strains of the bacteria. So if you're looking at a probiotic, for example, and you know that you have an insufficient amount of a certain strain, you then can take that information when you're buying a probiotic and say, okay, I need something that has a higher amount in this specific strain. It's just interesting. So that's an option that's available here at Vessel Health. I haven't had anyone do it yet because we're newer with that lab, but I think that would be so interesting to someone who's having some of the symptoms to really look at their bacteria in their gut, so we can really tailor probiotics to that person.
Is it a blood test? Or it is?
Blood or sputum, yeah. They recommend typically blood though.
So Ashley, Sparky and some of them had mentioned some things, and I'm sorry, you guys, about the graphics not and the wording, you're not being able to see all that. we are going to make sure you get the link so that you can look at this, and we are also making some copies for you. Sparky, you mentioned leaky gut symptoms, and I think we're going through some of those now, but I also think you mentioned something about skin types of symptoms that may be, telltale of that too.
I think she signed off,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
but
Okay.
I'd be interested in your answer.
What are the symptoms of leaky gut, and can skin be part of that?
So I don't know the direct answer to that. I would assume that yes, because when we think of things like dermatitis or eczema, and you even mentioned, Denise, that you had some skin issues. So I think in general, yes. I don't know specifically to leaky gut, but I would assume so, because if you remember, your lining of your gut is not it's kind of parted, it's insufficient, and so the bacteria, the toxins, the whatever else that can cause inflammation is getting into your bloodstream. So yes, it can manifest in a dermatitis or something like that. I just don't know, from what specifically. But I would assume that it could be from the leaky gut syndrome. It didn't say that when I was doing some of my research, but I would assume that yes, it would be related.
Can you achieve knowledge through good diet, or do you have to do something?
No, so that's a good question. So yes, most people can achieve it through a good diet. So there have been a couple reports of saying, like, for example, vegetarians, whole plant-based diets you can achieve a healthy gut microbiome, so that you don't have to take probiotics. I personally take a probiotic supplement for myself. I'm a vegetarian, I'll just put that out there, but so I don't necessarily have to, but I do. And I started this a long time ago, actually. And I'm almost like, just, it's part of my routine and I do it, but I don't necessarily have to do it. You can achieve what you need to through plant-based, whole plant-based diet.
You can't get too much of the probiotics, the prebiotics.
Conversely, people that have poor diets suffer from
Absolutely.
So they make a connection between a bad diet and this syndrome.
Can you repeat that so they can hear? I don't know if they can hear on.
It's hard with the mask on
Oh,
too.
yeah. So Mark's question was, well, number one, can you just eat a good diet and that be sufficient and not have to take a supplement? And the answer really is yes. If you are on, getting enough fiber, getting enough whole foods, plant-based foods, then you don't necessarily have to take. And then he also asked, if you're eating a poor diet, would you be prone to leaky gut syndrome? And yes, absolutely. Because remember, if you're not on a good diet, or you're not giving you're not feeding your gut the good bacteria through a healthy diet, then that bacteria is what lines that epithelial. I'm going to go back to the slide so I can I'm more of a visual person. But the bacteria, remember, 3 to 5 pounds worth of bacteria will lines your epithelial wall. Okay, so if you have a leaky gut, it's impaired, the lining's impaired, that's what gives access to the bloodstream. And that's, again, those toxins and those microorganisms. Gluten's a huge pro-inflammatory food. People don't typically tolerate it well. So when your gut is impaired, that enters your bloodstream. It causes a lot of symptoms, the inflammation, the food intolerances, the skin changes like we talked about, which I'm assuming, it makes sense that it would come from that as well. So feeding your bacteria, your good bacteria in your gut to help line that epithelial, keep those cells tight in junction together to prevent the leakage of the gaps in that is extremely important and can be achieved by a good diet. But if you don't eat a good diet and you kind of know that and you're aware of that, I mean, we're not perfect. It's really hard to make a dietary change. Then probiotics should be in your regimen.
So I eat a lot of plant-based, a lot of veggies and stuff. My problem is that when I eat lots of salads or veggies or steamed, however I do it, that I always have tons of gas.
Yes. Yeah.
So what can you do about that?
So the typical recommendation, and that's very true, and that's again just kind of our bacteria feeding on that, breaking it down and releasing that. The typical rule for that is to try to, if you're going, so say you're going to transition to a plant-based diet and you're a meat eater, for example. That's another issue that they run into. So in general, it's to go slow. So try to incorporate those slowly. Try to not eat so much at once.
I've been eating veggies and all that for years. I don't eat red meats.
Okay.
And so I know I've been this way for years and
you
years.
still?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So I will say too, because I'm a vegetarian, there are certain things that still cause a little bit of like bloating or gas, and so that may be a little bit of just intolerance, and not really like leaky gut or anything like that, but just an intolerance to that. Like I know for me, black beans, for example, that's like, but pinto beans and other beans are fine, but like black beans really can cause some excess gas and bloating. So I think of that as more as like maybe a little bit of intolerance, or maybe it is just I need to not eat that as much. It's just too much fiber all at once. I don't. But the rule is, for meat eaters, for example, they're trying to go to a vegetarian diet, is to take it slow, because you can get a lot of excess gas and bloating when you're starting to incorporate more fiber and more vegetables and so on and so forth into your diet. So one way to try to avoid the amount is to try to incorporate a little bit slowly.
But isn't that like a natural occurrence, right? You need the high fiber foods.
Yeah.
So why would it be something that you would avoid?
Well,
Socially.
Uncomfortable.
you don't.
No, I mean, if it's good for you, your system should be working that way.
Yeah.
You know, I noticed that I'm more gassy if I eat a large portion of broccoli.
Yeah.
Or Brussels sprouts. Scientific studies about how bad the bugs smell when you eat one Brussels sprouts.
I'd love to read those studies here.
Okay. TMI. I'm kidding.
You should expect it. You should expect that. And some people, that deters them though. And I think that's the problem. It's like they're like, well, I can't eat that because it creates too much gas and bloating. And so they stop. And they shouldn't. It's to just incorporate it slowly, to expect that yes, it can happen. And then you shouldn't avoid the food altogether. You can try to just. Yeah.
And then as far as gluten goes, like I mainly eat, I don't like eat a lot of bread and stuff, but I do get gluten-free stuff. So if you do eat some gluten, I mean, some gluten is okay, right?
Yeah, it depends on you and your body. So I have patients who are, gluten intolerant or have celiac, and then so it like the range of the gluten that they can eat differs. Like my celiac patients, they can't do anything, and then my intolerance patients, like they just know they're intolerant to it, and they'll eat a little bit here and there, just knowing the side effects that may come with that. It's not to say like you should stop eating gluten. My general rule for all my patients when I talk about dietary education is you don't have to really eliminate anything from your diet, because everyone's a little bit different. You should really try to focus on eating more plants and fruits and vegetables and whole grains and so on and so forth. And so in terms of gluten, we know it's a pro-inflammatory food. If you can tolerate it, then still it would be my recommendation would be in moderation. Don't try to eat it for every meal. But and generally that works pretty well. And then some people, they do cut it out completely. I mean, if you go to, you know, some functional medicine physicians, they'll say, stop all gluten and stop all sugar. You know, they just say, stop it. They just put an end to it. I know some local cardiologists who kind of have the same, who suggest the same thing. And that can be hard, and that's when people fail, because they're really eliminating a lot. I mean, sugar is in everything, gluten's in a lot too. And so it's just in moderation, trying to do what's right in terms of how you feel. If you can do gluten once a day or a couple days a week and you feel fine, then that's fine.
So basically what you're saying is smaller adjustments are really the way to go, and just kind of,
Yeah.
and really gauge it by how you're feeling and really pay attention to your body and even maybe even mental, what you're feeling, some of those things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and with gluten too, like my rheumatoid arthritis patients, because they have so much inflammation, like they really just can't tolerate it, and it causes a flare up of some of their symptoms. So it may not even just come from the gut, but you may see it in like, you know, arthritis in your hands and so on and so forth. Like it manifests differently. Any other questions, stories, comments?
Well, if you eat a lot of fruit also, and some veggies too, I mean, that's a complex carb. So that will still break down to glucose. It's not a simple sugar, but so if you're eating a lot of fruit, does that screw things up in terms of that amount of more glucose?
No, in fruit, and so when we talk about fruit and sugar too, I never say to eliminate or decrease fruit, because it is a complex, and because you get a ton of phytonutrients from fruits and plants, and yeah, it's not going to work the same as like you eating a donut. It's different. Exactly. Yeah. So there's really you shouldn't really like put a cap on the fruit amount of fruit you eat. Yeah. Questions?
Are there any questions?
Something that I may have talked about that wasn't clear?
Thank you. I think you did an amazing job.
Yes, wonderful job. Really.
Very interesting topic. So, okay, I'm gonna stop this.
I have a question. If we're buying one of these probiotics, the difference between them is what and what? How do I know which one?
I know. So the difference is the different strains, the different CFUs.
The one that I took.
So let me look on this one, for example. So, and it should say,
so the one that we have, you think it's better?
It had, yeah, because it had the amounts, it had how they were different.
yeah, and on the back too, it'll tell you what different strains are in the product. So for example, this one has 50 billion CFUs of a proprietary blend and another 50 billion CFUs of a Fido blend, which is one of the
They had the ones for decreasing depression in all of them.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So it will tell you on the back. That's a good question though, Julie, because they are all different, and that's why they like some of them have a little bit different packaging too, different names. This is the plus, this is just the probiotic, and this is the max. So it's hard. It's hard.
It almost seems like you should get this gut test.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, really, otherwise you could be totally wasting your money.
It's so hard to decide, and that's why it's, there's not one answer for all, fits all, because everyone's different. Everyone may, or you may, Patricia, may need something different than me, based on how you feel, based on your history, based on your bacteria in your gut. So, hopefully some of the information too, with talking about some of the strains, what I would do personally is look up the strains and look up what it helps with. So I know we talked about certain ones reducing inflammation, certain ones helping with IBS, certain ones helping with ulcerative colitis. And then when you're looking over the counter or here, or whatever, just making sure that specific strains and the probiotic that you get. So, you know, again, in general, diversity, getting enough CFUs, and having a variation of strains is typically safe for everyone. But it could be that you need a different strain, and it's hard to know that. Like, I can't tell you by looking at you or just knowing, you know, it's hard to really know. And not many people do the, you know, getting the gut test and the blood test and taking a deeper dive. And doing research is extremely important on the probiotic that you are going to go with. There are certain companies out there like Align and Culturelle that are pretty well researched, and knowing that what's actually in the product is what you're taking, right? Or what's on the box, I should say. So doing your research is extremely important in any supplement, because there's so many out there, there's so many options. So hopefully a little bit of what we talked about today will help. Hopefully some of the pointers will help out in deciding if a probiotic, when you're shopping, what probiotic is best. But it's hard to say for sure what's gonna.
These were good for IBS. These were good for depression. And I thought there was also good for Crohn's. That one I'm not positive, but it was IBS and definitely depression. These were,
Yeah.
these were
These different strains or they different amounts?
different amounts.
Do you think that, I mean, if someone's like someone who dabbles in vegetables, or someone who's vegetables is all I eat, maybe take that one a little bit. I eat no vegetables, maybe more not a lot.
I would say the Probiotic Plus has a little bit of, has some different, this has Saccharomyces in it. So this does have some other different strains. These are generally the same as far as the strains are concerned, but just the different amounts are different.
So the strengths.
The strengths are different. Yeah. How many CFUs are different, but the strains are the same. This one has a little bit more variety of strains. And then the CFU, I mean, it's still like you get still a ton of CFUs, like way more than what's, you know, recommended, or at least the least amount. So we want to do at least 1 billion CFUs, and this has 10, 15, and 15. So 40 CFUs in it.
Last year I had a total baby replacement. I was prescribed after the surgery. And then after I finished that regimen, I don't know which one.
Took the weaker one.
Took that entire box over time. And I never noticed any difference in any difference between, you know, I know the antibiotics killed all the food, and then by replenishing it, I really didn't notice a huge difference between before and after. So there wasn't sort of a cause and effect.
Mark's vegetarian.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll say that too. When I started my probiotic blend, I mean, I didn't notice a crazy change. Like, you know, they talk about that if you don't eat generally, you know, a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole plant foods, that you can feel like an increase in energy and so on and so forth. Anxiety, the depression that we talked about. So maybe it'd be kind of interesting to see, like, in a patient who's not a plant-based patient taking a probiotic, how they feel. They feel different. So, because I am the same. I didn't really feel like, oh, this is a magical thing, but I just thought it was important to kind of keep my gut healthy. So that's why I continue to take it.
So the gut test you're talking about, is that you have to have a doctor's order for that, or you can just come in and have it done?
You know, I'll reach out to them. We have tests here in the clinic that we can actually draw the lab and then send it. I believe we have a few here still. They dropped some off. So I'll have to reach out to them. It may be something that you can just do on your own, not have to be a patient, not have to have an order. And so I'll reach out to them to see if that's true and how people can do that.
Okay, cool.
Because they work for a bunch of different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right, I
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As a collaboration.
and I
Yeah,
can
a
give
group
some
rate.
printed out information on what's included in that gut testing. It's really interesting. They do a bunch of testing, but that gut testing is extremely interesting.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting.
There's a lot of like nice beneficial things. That sound great, like energy, reducing inflammation. There's a lot of like nice positive things. That to me is just like optimizing the actual epithelial line's health and promoting the short chain fatty acid production and reducing the. So,
Yeah.
for no other reasons.
It's, the real big one is up here. Is that one you want? I can.
It's just, so
Yeah, there's this little yellow one.
we talked about this, doing the healthy living series, it's like, God, how can we talk about that? Because it's just so becoming so like, and not even just here, but other practitioners are just really diving deep into like, how's what are you eating? Are you taking a probiotic? What does your gut health look like? Do you have leaky gut syndrome? It's becoming so more and more prevalent and talked about and discussed and researched. And so, and I don't have everything here. I mean, the list goes on and on about the benefits, but it's just, hopefully you realize that it's important today. That's all.
That one slide you put up had the list of some probiotic food and prebiotic. Can I just Google that and probably get the same thing? Just
Yeah.
that way? Because that was a good list.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why my computer. Partial list.
You can get a huge list. Yeah, I like the prebiotic part of that. Yeah.
There's another, I'll print this out or I'll copy this in this book. So there's a book, I think Denise mentioned it in your, when you did your cooking class and talking about that too. Did you bring up the book or no? I can't remember.
There were several. So
You brought up-
we got Dr. Peterman who does the brain. There's so many right now. So Sinai pies.
Yeah, you
The
brought,
inflammation.
yeah.
And in this book, the Psychobiotic Revolution, there's actually a list in the back that I'll copy for anyone who wants it. And it literally goes through all the strains of probiotics and what they're used for, like what they're good for, like inflammation, stress,
Oh, yeah,
anxiety.
I
I only listed like a few. Yeah. I mean, the list goes on. We'd be here for like another 2 weeks if I mentioned all of those, but it's awesome to have.
So,
certain areas down. Yeah.
so everybody knows too that we did mention that we'll make sure you get a copy of the PowerPoint. And here's the book that she's referring to.
And this was introduced in the first class too.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley. That was a great presentation. So much to learn. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't.
Oh, there we go. It's like